Pec strain or tear rehab protocol. I strained it in the stretch position, not benching. That's weird. Go see a professional. That's my pain in the ass dog too. Go see a professional physical therapist. Get it assessed. See what's going on. I don't know how bad it is, but definitely get some tissue work done. I'm a huge fan of ART work, scraping, all that stuff. Get some manual work done on it. When you get stuff like that, that tissue will bind up, and you need to kind of lay it back down, for lack of a better term, and get it moving again. If you're not doing that stuff, scar tissue is going to build up and lead to a worse tear later on down the road. So get on it early, get a lot of therapy done on it, get it taken care of. Don't be a tough guy. You can't rehab something that's not attached. So you don't want to fucking rip that fucker off the bone later on. So get it taken care of. I don't know. As far as a rehab protocol, start easy. Make sure your range of motion is back. Work with a physical therapist who deals with athletes and lifters. I'm not sure where you're located, but usually, like with the internet and stuff, have I ever seen a grown man naked? What the fuck was I saying? You threw me off with a naked guy comment. Get with a good PT that works with lifters. With the internet, it's not. It's easy to find somebody who's good nowadays. So get with a professional. Come back slow. Get it taken care of. Don't rush back. Hey, Nate Harvey 20. Follow me, I'll follow back. How do you program conditioning work? Good question. I did an article over the summer about, it was like 8 weeks out from football camp or whatever. And like a real quick kind of rundown of that. A lot of my conditioning I stole from Charlie Francis's work. I'm a big fan of what he did and how he set things up, and I think it.
You come talk to Mom about those cheese curls.
Why?
She's not allowed to have it.
Just hold on. Give me like 20 minutes until the meatloaf's done, and then I'll let you know. It's non-fucking stop around here. What the fuck are we talking? Conditioning. I think Charlie's stuff lines up real well with Conjugate or the Westside. What's up, Rich? Conjugate Westside model. Having the high intensity and the low intensity days, it lines up really well. I've had really good success with it in the past, and it's very simple to follow. You don't have to be super complicated. If you go to my coach's log on Elite, and I think it's 8 weeks from the start of camp. Go check that out. It kind of lays it out, but basically what we've done, and I stole this from, when I was at UB, we had an intern go out and visit Tom Myslinski when he was the head guy at the Browns, who brought Charlie Francis down to kind of help set up their conditioning for the summer months. And the way they set it up was doing your alactic work or your ATP work or your short burst stuff, do it before your lower body training sessions. For the most part, this is, it kind of depends where you're at in the season and stuff and in the year in your training and stuff, but for the most part. So it was short burst stuff before your lower body workouts, and then after upper body lifting, it was longer tempo work. because you can do upper body and then go do some sub-maximal tempo work. With the tempo work, it was usually with shoes off on AstroTurf. If you can do that, I think it's a good idea to get the athletes out of their shoes, strengthen their feet up. And then there's prescribed, this is in my article, I'm pretty sure, there's prescribed distances and times. And you can kind of adjust based on your population, but it kind of puts them at somewhere around 70% of like a max sprint or a max effort. What's cool about that is you can actually coach and have them kind of think their way through some sprint mechanics and change of direction mechanics if you set it up right. So that's basically how we matched it up. Our running was sprint stuff before lower body days and tempo work after upper body days in the weight room. I'm a big fan of hills. I like hill running or resisted running. If you have sleds, if that's your option, that's fine. But kind of split it up that way. Go check that article out. But that's a real quick kind of rundown. I'm also a big fan of extended med ball throws. I messed around with this with our men's basketball team and women's basketball team my last year of coaching, and we saw some really good stuff come out of that, teaching them to do the throws right. And then they can either jog or walk to the med ball and do the throw again. But what that did while we were coaching the throws, like we do backwards overhead throws, what they did that for an extended period of time. We would coach opening the knees, reaching the butt back, the hips back, and stuff. So it gave us a chance to coach that stuff. And then when we went back into the weight room and actually did their squatting and stuff, I saw a definite improvement on their squat mechanics. So kind of get a lot of benefits out of that. I stole that from Mike Gadango, who used to work at DeFranco's gym. I'm a huge fan of DeFranco's stuff. But Mike, he kind of touched on that with some of his athletes. I was watching his stuff a few years back. So you can work some explosive stuff and get a little bit of oxidative work at the same time, bring their conditioning up, and even work on their squat mechanics. And everybody talks about the hinge and all that shit all the time. You can work on that and get a lot of benefits out of that. That was something we did, I want to say postseason with basketball. It was in the spring. So kind of depending where you're at in the year, you're going to have a ton of different options for your conditioning work. But hopefully that answers your question. If not, inbox me and we can go over more stuff. Oh. How do you teach high schoolers the value of hard work? This is tough. Use your indicator kids, your kids that work hard, that are high achievers, do a good job, are successful on the field. Use them as an example. Maybe split your groups up where instead of having all your high achievers in the same group, spread them out and make them captains of each lifting station or group and make them responsible for the other kids. It's tough. It's exhausting. It's tough. I hate the word culture, but you gotta have kind of a culture change, and it's gonna start with small changes. Use every teaching opportunity you have. Call kids out. I'm a big believer in being positive. Call kids out for doing a nice job. If you do where you bring the athletes up before and after the lift, point small things out. Point out good effort, things like that. Try to, honestly, this is funny. Working with high school kids and college kids is very similar to working with elementary physical education kids. Okay? Just make it very, very simple. And like I said, celebrate the small victories. Somebody is pushing hard, Make an example of them after the workout. Just small things like that, and over time it'll catch on. It's kind of like training, right? You're not going to go train for 10 weeks and go beat a world record. You got to train for years and years to get the results you want. So just, every day, every little teaching opportunity you have, don't I making kids do miserable workouts will not teach them to work hard. It will make them resent you. It will make them resent the weight room. You have to kind of show them and teach them. If you're a coach, you're a teacher first. So you gotta teach the small moments, and anytime you get a chance to make an example of somebody, do that. And it's not easy. I can sit here and say that, but it's fucking hard. But eventually, they'll catch on. You'll start getting kids catching on, and then it'll kind of don't have any. It'll catch on, and then it'll kind of snowball. So, don't get discouraged. Hang in there, but just keep chipping away. My college coach always used to talk about breaking rocks in a prison yard. You gotta hammer it. You're just gonna get little pieces, but one day you're gonna get that big swing, and it just crumbles a rock. So keep chipping away at it, and be consistent. How soon would you start someone on Westside type training? Max effort and dynamic work ASAP? ? I will always use the template, the basic template, but within those different, like you're talking about max effort and dynamic effort, we will start out using exclusively dynamic effort and repeated effort. That's usually the first month or so. And then after that, I'm going to, once they're technically proficient, 80% of the kids are technically proficient, we'll start putting in some heavy work. It doesn't have to be true max effort work. Keep in mind, they're going to get a training effect and make progress just from their dynamic effort or speed work and the accessory work, because they haven't done shit. So keep it very simple, keep it very easy, keep the movements, things that they can master. And then once they master those movements, then you can start working some heavier stuff. With the heavy stuff, it's really dependent on the kid, the group you're working with. As you think they're ready, then you can start putting in true max effort work. I really don't use age as an indicator. I use their readiness in the weight room. Okay, so like I had teams in the college setting. There was no way we were going to do true 1 rep max, true max effort work. They physically could have done it, but they weren't mentally there. They weren't focused enough, so we stayed away from it. Now there are other groups that did a great job, and I could have a room full of 30 kids doing true max effort work within a month. Okay, so it's all dependent on your population. Don't give them something they can't handle. All right, they got to be technically proficient. They got to be focused enough. So yeah, if you can get there, I think there's huge benefits to it. I always thought if they can handle it, we're gonna do it, but it really was dictated by the group whether they could do it or not. Okay. So yes, eventually yes, but make sure they're ready for it. Do I recommend 3-week max effort waves for athletes doing conjugate? Usually no. Absolutely, dude. Thanks for watching. 3-week waves for max effort work? No. You can. It's not to say you can't. I typically don't do that. I haven't done it in the past. Good question. I'll get to that in a second. My assistant did this with some success. Actually, he did 2 week waves. I'm sorry. So no, I think 3 is too long. I think the athletes get bored. I think the body adapts. I don't like running max effort work for 3 week waves. Max effort work's tough. You don't want to go in and do that same movement for 3 weeks in a row. Gino used to do he would do 2 week waves, and I've been doing that recently with my high school team that I'm consulting with. We're basically doing, so week 1, they work up to like an 8 or a 9 out of, on a scale of 1 to 10, go up till it's heavy and then cut it. And then week 2, I want them to go to it might be a 1 rep max, 2 rep max. Usually with these kids, it's usually 2 or 3. So 2 week waves are better. Once they're advanced, I like I switch it every week. I think so for example, with all the variations in the system, I think it's easy to, once you know the basics, the coaching cues and the things you need to watch for as a coach are basically the same. The different bars and the different accommodating resistances and stuff will throw it off a little bit, but you're still watching for the same basic cues. So if your kids are advanced enough, I think it's good to switch it up every week if you can. Like for example, right now we're running 2 week waves. So week 1 we kind of intro it. They go up to like a heavy 2, like I said, an 8 or a 9 out of 10, and then the next week they go up and try to beat that record. I think, like with high school kids, you got to deal with the attention span thing. So if you switch that up every week, I think it's tough on the coach. The coach has to, with it switching every week, they got to work their ass off, to be honest. And with high school kids being as young as they are, they can do it 2 weeks in a row and still get very good gains off of it. And that way it kind of rotates in almost like I don't want to say deload, but a week that's not quite as taxing, right? So that first week they go up till a heavy 2, and then week 2 is an actual max where they blow it out and get after it. So there's some advantages to that, but I think 3 weeks is too long. I think they get bored with it. I've never done it and had much success. I would put clean variation into the program, Olympic variations into a conjugate program. Put it on your dynamic effort, lower body day, before your speed squats. So when we did it, we always did it as like a neural primer, neuromuscular facilitative primer. They were primed. Yeah, that just, so like your lower body speed day, that makes the most sense. That's what you're going after. You're going after lower body speed strength. So put it in. To me, it's a little less taxing than a speed squat because you're going to use probably less weight than you would with a speed squat. You're definitely going to use less weight. So put it in before the speed squat. Use it as like a neural primer. If you're crunched for time, only if you're crunched for time, you could substitute it for jumps. No, fuck that. Figure out a way to fit the jumps and the clean variation in there. I'm too big a fan of jumps to take them out. So, yeah, put it in lower body speed days before your speed squats. Keep the weight sub-maximal. If you're dealing with a sport coach that thinks they have to use a ton of weight, maybe Maybe you can work it where every other week you kind of work up and weight a little bit. Let the kids work up to what feels like an 8 or 9 out of 10 for a couple doubles or something. But the previous week, keep it light and fast so that you can actually think about what they're doing and do a halfway decent job with it and not look like shit. I'm trying to think of easy things to do to make that work. But that's whenever I had to do it, that's where I put it in. Just because that makes the most sense. That's your objective of that day is speed strength. So if you have to do Olympic variations, put it on the dynamic effort lower body day. Do I teach parts of the clean? Only if I have to. Because I think it's a waste of fucking time, to be honest. So when I had to, yeah, we so what we did, yes, we broke it down. We did like a 2-week wave of like a power shrug or a shrug. You may not have a choice. I know, yeah. So just do it, Fuck, do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. Play the game. If any of you guys have to put Olympic stuff in and you need some help on how to do it and not fuck up the whole program, feel free to inbox me. To me, that's what's cool about the Conjugate system. You can fuck around with it quite a bit and not screw the athletes over. So that's a huge reason that I'm a big fan of it, because I had to do that a lot. You got to work around coaches running the shit out of your kids, coaches wanting to do all these stupid fucking exercises that they saw on YouTube or did during their subpar fucking high school athletic career. If you ever need help figuring out where to put stuff in a program without fucking your kids up, let me know. Someone's at the door. I don't know if it's the dog or my kids. Where were we? Teaching parts of the clean. Yeah, so fucking kids don't know how to open a door. When I had to put that stuff in, we tried to put it in slowly, so we would do like a 2-week wave of pause. Hold on a second. What's up?
Are you gonna pop them off?
I told you like 20 minutes, bud.
It's not 20 minutes.
No, it hasn't.
Then how come your thing's not baking?
It is baking. I'll be in there in a minute. Holy fuck. The Olympic stuff. So to me, if we're going to put this stuff in, I want the kids to look good doing it. So I would take like 2 weeks. If the coach will go for it, I think one-arm dumbbell snatch is a very good variation. It's way easier to teach. It's way easier to actually achieve triple extension. It's actually not a bad exercise. It's actually not a bad way to teach triple extension. One of my issues with the Olympic variants is the athletes, especially when you go heavy, they don't actually get into triple extension, which is what everybody talks about. So if the coach go for it, 3 weeks of one-arm dumbbell snatch is a great movement. Next 2 to 3 weeks, does she want out? Just shut the door, please. Shut the door. Next 2 weeks would be like power shrug or just with a bar and weight, triple extension. I don't even know what the fuck you want to call that. Whatever. Power shrug. Going up and just going into the shrug. Next 2 to 3 week wave would be a high pull from a hang. Do most of this stuff from a hang. Going from the floor would be my last thing. So we go one arm dumbbell snatch, power shrug, high pull. Then we'll go into the rack where we actually do a hang clean. After that 2 to 3 week wave, then maybe go to an actual power clean. Okay, so that's how I would do it. If the coach is cool with that and that slower progression, for us that usually worked pretty well. The big, like, when we had to put that stuff in, the kids were technically proficient. They did a nice job with it. The only issue I had with it, our testing results were about the same as, or even less than when we did not do those variants. So, take that for what it's worth. Most of you will be in a situation where you have to put that bullshit in and have to do it. So if you have to do it, that's how I would do it. Sponsored by Wendy's. Wendy's protein drink. What is your take on vertical pressing for baseball, softball, volleyball athletes? So basically overhead stuff for overhead athletes. I used to be a very, I don't want to say, we didn't do much with our overhead athletes. Looking back, excuse me, we could have done a little more, I think. The kind of about the time I got out of coaching, I kind of was messing around with some stuff for myself because of my own shoulder health. And not that we would have done a lot of it, but I think there's some good variations for accessory work that probably could have helped our kids out. And we used to do very little. And I'm trying to think back of shoulder issues we had. We didn't have many. Hold on. Jesus fucking criminy. Fuck it, we'll do it live. So going back to the overhead pressing thing with overhead athletes, we didn't do much at all. Our shoulder health was pretty good overall. We did have some issues with our pitchers at one point. And looking back, they were getting the absolute shit thrown out of them. So it was nothing we were doing. But looking at things that I could have done better, I probably would have done a little more overhead pressing with some of the accessory work. I'm a big fan of taking a micro mini band and doubling it up and put it around your wrist while you press. Kettlebell Arnold presses. So the handle of the kettlebell is in your hand and the bell is over here on the back side of your hand, and you do like the old Arnold press. That's been very good. It's a very comfortable overhead movement. So if I could go back and do something different, I probably would have done a little more overhead pressing with our throwers. I probably would have done a little more overhead pressing, but it would have been pretty conservative in our accessory work. There's a few variations that I would put a little more work in with those kids. So, neutral grip stuff, bamboo bar stuff, Bradford press. But nothing I would not put in like push jerks. I would not do snatches. I would not do max effort overhead stuff. It would all be accessory, kind of shoulder friendly, overhead variation stuff. So, good question. What other forms of training have you had success with? What types of training outside of Conjugate piques your curiosity that you think might work? Conjugate has worked the best, so I'm not going to fuck with anything else, and I've tried every other goddamn thing out there. I didn't have a strength coach growing up. I didn't have the internet. I got into my early 20s. I had the internet. I tried a bunch of different things. I was still trying to compete at a high level athletically. Conjugate worked the best. So if I'm going to cut a tree down, I'm going to use a chainsaw and not a fucking steak knife. And I've tried a lot of shit. And what's funny is when I've gotten too far away from the basic principles of the system, and I've seen this with myself, and I've seen it with a lot of the athletes I've worked with, things don't go well. So, I'm biased. I'm biased as fuck, I know. But, I've seen it. I've seen people go away from it and kind of fall apart, and not fall. I don't want to be dramatic. I shouldn't say fall apart, but not do as well. So I'll come back to Minnesota anytime. What's your take on kids under 14 weight training? Do it. Just don't crush them. Just teach them the movements and do a little bit of work, and they'll see a huge benefit from it. My kids, if they want to, they will train before they are 14. They're getting to that age now. My son is 8. Yes, 8. My son's 9. My daughter's 11. They're going to start doing some stuff. Not a ton of crazy stuff, but if they're going to be involved in athletics, you need to do a little bit of work. I train mostly baseball, softball athletes.